Robert Dakota of Worldviews Media, and I'm here with you from Sedona, Arizona, together with my good friend Martin Gray, who is in Argentina right at the moment. Martin Gray is going to be speaking at our event in May on the at the Earth Origins 2020 event, May 15th to the 17th. And he's going to be presenting his Sacred Earth slideshow. Martin Gray is a National Geographic freelance photographer and visited 1,500 sacred sites in more than 165 countries. He's also the author of the book Sacred Earth, Places of Peace and Power, as well as the National Geographic book The Geography of World Religions. He has an amazing site, sacredsites.com, that's been viewed by more than 170 million people since its inception. And it's a world pilgrimage guide now. So people wanting to go to these power places can go to this guide and find out information from mythology, history, cultural aspects behind it, and get a real good overview of these places you might be interested in visiting after this conversation with Martin. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Martin Gray. So Martin is with us here all the way from Argentina. Thank you for joining us, Martin. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got into travel and how all this came about, the book that you authored and the website, and give us a little bit of background?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I was lucky to have two parents who really enjoyed traveling. My parents actually met in China. They were both working with the US government and they got married there. And then I was born in Colorado, but when I was about a year old, we moved to Germany. My father was stationed there, lived there for 4 years. I don't remember any of that. I was too young. Then when I was 12 years old, my dad got transferred to New Delhi, India. And that's really the most pivotal experience in my young life. And I was able to experience the magic of India, the exoticism of India for 4 years when I was 12 to 16. Then I returned to the United States and I went to a private school for 3 years. And then I started University of Arizona to study Mesoamerican archaeology, but I became enamored with a certain meditation style and an Indian guru. And I spent 10 years as a monastic member of this organization. And then I felt that I no longer wanted to do that. I wanted to do something of my own, but I didn't really know what that was. So I decided that first I needed to make some money. And a friend and I set up a couple of travel agencies in Miami, Florida. And one of them really did very well. And so I had some money, but I was unhappy. There was something deeper that I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what that was. And one night after having a meeting with my business partner, I went back to my apartment and I was standing on the porch of my apartment and just thinking about this, meditating and just wondering what was going to happen with me. And I shut my eyes and I began to see this vision. And I saw these stone heads on the island of the Easter Island in Chile in the Pacific. And I heard these words that said, "Go here and you will begin to find the answers to your prayers." So I opened my eyes. This was astonishing. What was I experiencing? I opened my eyes and I looked around and I could see trees. I could see other buildings. I could see the full moon. I shut my eyes and here was this picture again. So the next day I went into my travel office and I didn't tell my business partner what had happened. I didn't know what had happened. But then every morning there was a certain woman who worked in the office and it was her duty to go to the post office box, get all the mail. And if you're a travel agent, you get a lot of mail sent to you from cruise ships and airlines and hotels that you're supposed to give to prospective clients. And so she would get that, and she would also get coffees for different people in the office. And I saw her walk into the office, and so I went to get my coffee and just talk to her. And while I'm talking to her, I'm drinking my coffee, and I'm tapping my hands on the top of the stack of mail that she had just brought in. It was not there from the day before. She just brought it in. And then she stops my hand from tapping, and I look down, and underneath my hand is the stack of brochures. In one of those brochures, the very top one, has exactly the same picture that I'd seen the night before in my vision. This was astonishing to me because, again, that brochure had just come that morning. I hadn't seen it before. So I went upstairs and I got the manager. It was from Chile Airline, the airline of Chile. I got the manager of the airline on the phone. He knew of my company, and I couldn't tell him I had a vision, but I wanted to go to Easter Island. I wanted to go to some other places down there. And so he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, my company's interested in expanding our business to some other parts of Central and South America. He said, when would you like to go and where? And I told him, and he said, I'll send you a free ticket. So a
Wow.
few weeks later, I went to Easter Island, and then I went to Machu Picchu after that. And in both of them, not expecting to have another one of these visions. I'd already been interested in archaeology for years and years and years. And I was just on the top of this one volcano extinct volcano in Easter Island called Arano Raraku. And then a couple weeks later at Machu Picchu, at a very important place inside the ruins of Machu Picchu. And in both of them, while I was meditating, I had another visionary experience. And in this experience, I saw this, what I understood to be a 5-story wooden pagoda, a certain temple type that you find in Korea, China, Japan, Vietnam, in Nepal. And I saw this picture of this 5-story wooden pagoda, and I heard this words again. This time it said, follow the pilgrimage routes of the ancient religions. And I see this picture in my head of this 5-story wooden pagoda. So then I go back to Miami, and my business partner, a few days later, he said, what happened to you down there? You're a little bit different. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to tell him. So I told him about the vision that had instructed me or suggested that I go to Easter Island. And then I told him about the visionary experiences I had in both Easter Island and Machu Picchu. And he said, well, I think you should go do that, but please wait. Don't go right now. We're in our busiest season for our business. Go next summer or in the next fall. And so what I did is I spent a number of months studying Japanese. And then I went to Washington, D.C., and I didn't know how to do the research on this set of subjects at that point. But I went to the Library of Congress. In the morning, I'd go to this Japanese course, and in the afternoon, I'd go to the Library of Congress. And I started looking through photography books and architecture books of Japan. And I saw these pictures of various temples, and that there were sacred mountains too. I hadn't really known about this. So then many months later, I go to Japan on a bicycle. I took a bicycle over there, and I spent 6 months riding all over 2 of the main islands, mainly Honshu, the biggest island in Japan, going to these sacred mountains and these temple complexes. Well, near the beginning of that journey, there's a sacred mountain in northern Japan, in the north part of Honshu, called Haguro-san. There's 3 sacred mountains there, Yaguno-san, Ga-san, and Haguro-san. And so I was starting to climb the sacred mountain of Haguro-san, and I saw this path to the left, and I thought, well, what's down that path? And I went down the path, and lo and behold, there is this 5-story wooden pagoda that I had seen in a vision. And this was an extremely incredible experience for me. And I climbed the mountain, and then I spent many more months in Japan and then also in Korea visiting other sacred sites. And after Korea, I came back to Japan, and I thought I was going back to my travel company in Miami. My business partner was upset with me for being gone longer than I said I would. And so I went to this last sacred mountain, sacred hill. There's a very important Shinto temple in Japan called Izumo Taisha. And I'd gone there for a very important festival. And the night of the festival was extraordinary. But the next day I came into the temple complex early in the day because I wanted to photograph pilgrims there. There was hardly anybody there. So I went up on this hill overlooking the temple. And when I was up there, I sat to meditate. And I had another one of these visionary experiences. And in this one, what occurred to me is I saw a sort of a picture of the earth spinning as if we were looking at it from space, spinning slowly. And I saw these points of light on the earth, surface of the earth, glowing points of light. And I was given to understand that these points of light, what they do is they represent where these power places, some of which are known as sacred sites, these power places are on the planet. And that if I liked, I could continue to go to these places. That's what I've been doing in Japan. I could continue to go to these places all over the world. That was a great idea. I really like that notion. I'm a 30-year-old guy. I've got the money. Well, let's keep riding a bicycle around the world, going to these power places, these sacred sites. And I went back to Miami, and I told this to my business partner. He wasn't happy with that, but I sold the company to him. And I had enough money to continue to travel for a number of years. And so I did another, 20 different countries by bicycle in Mexico and in Europe. And then I came to understand that that's not the most effective way of traveling. And so I started doing buses and trains for years and years and years, and then renting cars. And now, 38 years later, have been to about 1,500 of the most significant and venerated pilgrimage sites of human civilization in 165 countries. So, and then I did that book, the photography for that book, for, Geography of Religion by National Geographic. I didn't write that one. I did the photography, was the primary photographer. And then Barnes and Noble in 2007, I think it was, did a book called Sacred Earth. And that was gorgeous, gorgeous book. They did that in 2 editions in a number of different languages. And so here I am today in Bariloche, kind of southern Argentina, and my 5th time to Argentina. In 1998, I drove an old Volkswagen van from Sedona, from Los Angeles down to Buenos Aires. I drove through 14 countries. That was a year, a wonderful journey inside in that, sleeping in that vehicle, getting robbed, visiting some really beautiful, beautiful sacred sites. So that's kind of my travels in a nutshell.
I've heard you say that there's a lot of specific types of energies at these sacred sites that you refer to more as places of power. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, that's another great question. I did this, the first of my books, maybe, 30 years ago. I did a book called Planetary Acupuncture. And I was already coming to understand that there was a correlation between the acupuncture system, the acupuncture meridians, acupuncture points on a human body, and a similar thing on the earth. Well, my knowledge of that has become quite refined over the years. So now what I think is that the earth is a living being, but of a type of living being that we don't normally, it doesn't fit the parameters. You know, human beings, they think, oh, they think they know everything. They think they can define what life is. And I think sometimes their definition sort of blinds them. I'm doing the thing of a horse with blinders. They don't see what's out there. Um, I think the earth is a living being of a type of a set of living beings that perhaps is all over this vast, vast, vast galaxy. Of this living being, the earth, it seems to me that there are certain set of these power places that have a certain regularity of placement on the planet Earth, regularity of geographic placement. And I can't explain what that is, but I had a vision. The first one I was at a Bulgarian monastery, Zographou, in Mount Athos in Greece, back in 1985. And I saw this, again, this planet Earth spinning this time, and I noticed, oh, here's these points of light. And then I was sort of able to see inside the surface of the Earth, and I saw, maybe some of you are aware of this thing called platonic solids. Well, there's a tetrahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron. You've heard of those. You could look it up on Google Images, see platonic solids. Well, I saw this picture inside the Earth of what I understood, that all of these platonic solids, if you put them together, and where the vertex points of these sort of like crystalline shaped structures, where the vertex points hit the interior sphere of the Earth, determined where there were power places on the surface of the Earth. And then years later, I came to understand that also there's these logarithmic spirals going out at the golden mean 1.66, golden mean either going clockwise or counterclockwise out of these points, and where these points intersect other lines sets up a number of different meridians on the planet Earth. And like in the human body, where different meridians are associated with certain organs of the body, different meridians have different energies or characteristics. The same thing with these grids on the planet Earth. And it is my feeling, and these are not ley lines. In 1921, a guy named Alfred Watkins wrote a book called The Old Straight Track, in which he talked about ley lines, which later on he said, my understanding was incorrect in the way that he talked about ley lines, and the way that the New Age movement in the United States today talks about them are different, and the way people talk about them right now are not the way that Alfred Watkins, who brought forth that idea, even talked about them. But I'm not talking about ley lines. What I'm talking about is some sort of geometric grid of points. And it seems that when human beings find these places, and I could talk about how they find them, but when human beings find these places, and then they start going to these places, and remember, when we're talking 3, 4, 5, 8,000 years ago, people don't have cell phones, they don't have cars, they don't have the internet, they walk places, and then they walk back to where they came from. And when they come back, when they go to one of these power places, and they go back to their village or their wherever they are, it could be hundreds of miles away. And people say, well, what was it like where you were? And they talk about their experiences. Well, because people go to these sites and they have certain experiences at these power places. And if enough people going to these places have a certain experience and they talk about these experiences over centuries, millennia, it sets up a myth, it sets up a legend. Well, the legends, the myths, what they are is a metaphoric sort of indication of the power of place. And what I mean by this is if you see a sacred site that is dedicated to a deity, ask yourself the question, is it a feminine deity or a masculine deity? Well, this will give you an indication, probably, possibly, of what is the gender, what is the energy characteristic. Is it yin? Is it yang? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it masculine? Is it feminine? Does it go this way? Does it go that way? These metaphors, these genders of the deities are metaphors for energy that way. But then if you look at deities and you say, well, what are they a deity of? What is it a god or a goddess of? And then you will find out these different gods and goddesses have different characteristics. A really great place to look at this is India, for example. In India, there's three major gods: Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Well, did they really exist in the forms they're sometimes shown? Or are they metaphors? Are they myths? Are they indications of a certain quality? And my feeling is that if you go and you study the pilgrimage places of India, the pilgrimage places, not just regular temples, but the pilgrimage temples, you will find from the myth, they'll say, oh, these various deities, they came here and they did certain things. I believe that what this means, the things that the deities had done, what they are is their expressions of the power of certain grids, the power of certain clusterings of sacred sites. Okay, so I feel really, really strongly that these different power places have different energies, and a lot of times you will know what the energy is if you study the myth, if you study the legend. And on my website, sacredsites.com, which is called the World Pilgrimage Guide, used to be called Places of Peace and Power, but now it's World Pilgrimage Guide. In that, I have all these beautiful pictures of the sacred sites. And then I talk about their mythology and their archaeology and their history and their contemporary importance. By telling you about the mythology and the archaeology, I give you an indication, an idea of what's the power, what's the quality of this place, how might it affect you? And if that resonates with you, if that attracts you, then you'll know where to go. There's all these beautiful Google maps that show you the exact location of the shrines. And then just wonderful, wonderful, beautiful, beautiful pictures of these places in probably about 140 countries on the website.
Yeah, I love your work, Martin. The way I came to know of you was I was living in Copenhagen, Denmark, and a good friend of mine said he had just seen this slideshow in Christiania. For those people who know what Christiania is in Copenhagen, Denmark, it's a very special place. And he said, you need to check out this guy, Martin Gray. And I was like, yeah. And I saw on your website that you had said you wanted to go to 500 countries in 10 years and show this slideshow to inspire people with the energy of those images. And that's how I found out about you. That was, I think it was 2002, 2001. And then in 2003, I was here in Sedona. I came to Sedona to meet you. So that led to me living in Sedona and knowing you all these years. And so that's just one small spoke of the wheel of all the spokes that you've laid out over all the years doing your slideshows around the world. And you're going to be here again in May with us doing another slideshow. Can you tell us a little bit about what people experience in your slideshow?
I've done that slideshow probably, or various forms of the slideshow, around 300 of them in the last 25 years. And I would do the slideshow, and then afterwards I would stand in the front of the audience, and people would come up and they would tell me their experience. And after maybe 30 or 40 of these slideshows of people coming up and telling me their experiences, I began to notice, oh, a number of people have used this particular word in describing their experience at the slideshow, and that word was a window. People would tell me that when they were sitting in a slideshow and I was talking, that for them, the photographs became windows where they felt they were looking through the window at the sacred site. And one woman even said she felt like she was in a room in a house, in a building that had all these different windows, and you could look through the windows and see all of these places. It was this sort of magical building she called the slideshow. So I began thinking, oh, this is how people are experiencing this. And I began, when I was out taking the photographs, holding that sort of in my mind, that when I'm composing these images, that I'm going to pray, will intend, I hope that they become windows for other people, because not that many people are going to be able to go to all of these places the way that I've done. So that by looking at the photographs, maybe there's some sort of transmission of what I call a visual homeopathic essence. Something of the site comes through the photograph and touches the people. You know, I tell all this history and archaeology, but now I don't do that so much anymore because all that information is on the website for free. So what I do with the slideshows is I tell my own experience, because a lot of times people say, well, what happened to you? We can read the archaeology and the history on their website, but what happened to you? So in my slideshows, I tell people what happened to me. I'm also doing this thing now with the slides. This, what I'm going to do at your conference, is really quite fascinating, and I've tested this out a few times, and it really, really works nicely. That I'm calling my slideshow a group shamanic event, and by that, what I mean is I'm going to show 240 images during an hour period. And the images will change every 15 seconds. And it'll be a large screen in a dark room and one picture at a time. And so a picture comes up, and first of all, it's just the photograph, a horizontal or a vertical, and a black bar either to the side or underneath it. And you just see the photograph for 5 seconds. And then fading into the black is the name of the place. So you're seeing the photograph in the name of the place, and it fades out. And you have another 5 seconds where you're just, and then another image fades in, and this process happens again. And there'll be this beautiful music playing while these photographs are showing. These windows are being presented to people to look through. Well, it's my experience that different people resonate with different images. And when they're resonating it, something happens inside of them that is projected outward. I feel that there's an elation, there's an effervescence of spirit that people experience. And I think that when you're showing, let's say that your conference is going to have 500, 600, 700 people in it. So while these pictures are showing, let's say 500 people are looking for every single image. 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people in the hall will be experiencing this jolt, this inner jolt of a resonance. And then there'll be another picture. And then a different group of people will experience that. And then a different, and a different, and a different. So during a period of an hour, you have 240 photographs that are showing, windows that are being opened to people, and there'll be constantly people in the group experiencing this shamanic state. And because it's a group of people, it's a group shamanic event. And so you have this sort of window that is created there by all of these windows being shown, that people at that point, all these people are tapping into this particular power that is created by the resonance between people in these sacred sites. And that's what we're going to be experiencing at your event this coming summer.
I've been wanting to do something like this with you for years. We've talked about it, and for whatever reason, time needs its time. Now we're going to be able to do it, and I'm super excited about it, because after all these years, teaching workshops, meditation workshops in Japan, and traveling to more of these sacred sites or energy spots, I could really see the difference in people. Just even when you take people out in nature, their character changes. They get more friendly, they get nicer, they want to say hello. I've really witnessed firsthand the effect that a group resonant energy can have on an individual, and an individual can have on the group. Just when they're experiencing a genuine feeling of gratitude. And so I'm really excited that you're going to start the event off that way. That's going to be cool. Back to shamanism, tap on that a little bit. A lot of people have sort of a glorified view of shamanism where it's more like showmanism. It's a grueling road. It's kind of tough. And I've heard like some shamans from Mongolia said that they tried to avoid it with all their strength. Nobody wants to be one necessarily. But could you share some of your experiences and your definition of shamanism?
Well, one of the things that's very interesting about shamanism, you find it all over the world in great antiquity. It's proto-religious. Before any of the great religions started, we have people seeking a connection with the great mystery. And there were a number of different methodologies that were used to have that connection. One thing that's very important to say is there's traditional shamanism, and then there's the sort of shamanism that the New Age movement has been talking about and practicing in Europe and the United States the last few decades. Well, as I jokingly, though somewhat cynically, say that going to a weekend workshop about shamanism in a hotel ballroom, you do not become a shaman. That is not shamanism. Shamanism, it is true that the life of being a shaman, if you study them, it doesn't seem to be very pleasurable. There's a lot of hardship they go through. And a lot of times the shamans are sort of social outcasts. Um, I think something that's very interesting regarding me, shamanism is not my specific study, though I've read a lot about shamanism and I've really experienced it myself, but it's not my specific focus of my work. My work is basically these sacred sites and pilgrimage traditions, but I feel that what I do with this slideshow is create a group shamanic experience. But one of the things that I'll say about shamanism that's really has interested me for a long time is how do people become shamans? And so reading, I found out there were a number of different ways that people became shamans. One of which is people would take these psychotropic agents. They'd eat mushrooms. They'd eat different types of plant substances that allowed them to have certain experiences. And then sometimes people would get hit by lightning. Sometimes people would be born into it, or they'd have epilepsy, which I also have. And then sometimes they would get clawed by a large mammal, or they would hear, this one is really fascinating to me, they would fall off a cliff and break multiple bones. Now, I was aware of all of these things from my studies of shamanism for many, many, many years. Then about, I think it was 15 years ago, I was scrambling on some rocks, climbing on some rocks, and interesting, mysterious, magical experience happened, and I fell 70 feet, not a bump down. I fell 70 feet straight, and I had 50 fractures. I shattered both wrists, both knees, both legs, both ankles, knocked out a whole bunch of teeth, 12 skull fractures. I got very, very badly injured, and I was in a hospital for 4 months and wheelchair for a while, and I have about 25 pieces of metal in my body. And then a year later, I got a really significant sort of epilepsy because of all the skull fractures. And then when I became conscious again, I remembered, oh, a lot of shamans had their awakening, had their introduction, had their entrance into the shamanic state by this particular similar experience of falling off a cliff and breaking multiple bones. If you study shamanism, you're also going to see that shamans there's a few things they're really notable for doing. They work for the benefit of an individual, or they work for the benefit of a group. And the shaman, what they will often do is they will go into a space, and sometimes they receive a teaching from a different animal, a bear, an eagle, or sometimes they get a teaching from a tree or a rock, and sometimes they just get a teaching from this sort of over shaman spirit, and it's brought back for an individual to help heal an individual, or it's brought back for the benefit of the people. Well, this is what I feel has happened to me. Because, Robert, you asked this question a minute ago of different types of sacred sites. And I remember when I first heard about this, and many of you listening to this will know if there's a particular place in Greece called Delphi. And Delphi is known as an oracle site. And there were women that would go and drink of these waters of these two different springs, and then they would have these visions of the future. Well, when I first heard this, then I went to Delphi, but I didn't really know. I was just at the beginning of my studies. Of my travels. I didn't really know what I was talking about when I came to this. But the notion of, oh, there's a place in Greek, a very important Greek place where women experience this oracle. They somehow are seeing into the future. Well, many years later, I found out that there's a lot of these oracle sites in the Greek world and in other parts of the world. So I thought, well, let's go to them all. So over a period of 15, 20 years, I went to about 80 of these different oracle sites of different religions and in different historical and prehistorical periods. And I would sit and I would do meditation at them. And in doing meditation, I was able to sort of turn off the dialogue, turn off the thinking, and allow myself to be empty, to be free, to be clear. And I would have these experiences, these precognitive visionary experiences, where I saw things that I interpreted were suggested to me that I really believe strongly. I saw things that were going to be occurring here on this planet in the short and medium term future. And some of them are beautiful, some of them are good, some of them are frightening, some of them we might say are bad, some of them are very, very dangerous. One of the things I don't talk about this on my slide, on my books and my website at all. In my slideshows, I've begun to talk about it more. One of the reasons I don't talk about it is because it is frightening. Some of it is very frightening. Some of it is inspiring, but some of it is frightening. People don't like to hear about some of the times of great difficulty that are coming. One of the things I'll do in your slideshow is I'll talk about some of these things, both the inspiring and the frightening, both of them. So I feel in a certain sense that I'm a contemporary shaman. When I call my slideshow a group shamanic event, well, the event is held by a shaman. So I'm doing something that's shamanic, yeah.
We know from looking back in history and talking to modern day medicine people, as they like to be referred to as, that psychedelics plays a big role in shamanism worldwide. Could you talk about that?
Well, I've had the experience of numerous different ethnogens, numerous different chemical and plant substances that allow you to have a connection with different teachings, different extraordinary experiences. I suggest that to people. I really do strongly suggest that people have those. Look through that window, look through that lens. I think that's a really, really good idea. It's sometimes scary, it's sometimes difficult. I would, I strongly suggest that. Strongly suggest that. Talk to, if you haven't done that and you would like to try that, talk to some people that know and perhaps get some guidance from them. Might even have one of them around when you do that. But I think here you're listening to someone now who's done this several hundred times, and so I'm still alive. I'm fine. I strongly suggest this. And it's a different people. Some people that are meditators, they go, oh, well, I don't need to do that. I just need to meditate. Well, I'm a hardcore veteran meditator. For around 45 years or so, I've been having a daily practice of meditation. 45 years. I've been doing a number of different meditation traditions. And meditation reveal, awaken in you a certain experience of mind, a certain experience of soul, a certain experience of psyche. Psychedelics give you another experience. One is not a substitute for the other. I think both are very, very beneficial. Very, very beneficial. I think that's important also to say. Well, I think one of the most important things that if you study Hinduism, you're going to find out that in Hinduism, sometimes they talk, and I think Randall, who you were talking with last night, some scientists who know about these things will say that there have been a number of different ages. You know, you'll hear people talk about the paleontological and the Precambrian and these sort of things. Well, in Hinduism, sometimes they'll talk about great ages, which they call yugas, Y-U-G-A. And there is 4 different yugas. And according to Hinduism, we're in a yuga called the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. Well, it is said for each yuga, there is a particular practice that is best for that practice. And for the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, the most appropriate meditational or spiritual practice, according to Hinduism, is bhakti yoga. Yoga with an O, Y-O-G-A. This yoga for a yuga. And what is bhakti yoga? Bhakti yoga is the yoga of devotion. And so in Bhakti Yoga, what one is encouraged to do is to see all as divinity, all as God, all as great spirit. And everything in your relationship with everything in your experience should be done with love. So whether it's your dog or your children or your neighbor or everybody, even political figures that you might dislike, might disagree with, try to extend towards them love. Try to extend love into the world. And one of the ways that I put it, people say, well, what should we do? And I say, get up in the morning, put goodness and beauty in the world. That's what I try to do. Get up in the morning and put goodness and beauty in the world. So one of the great teachings of my slideshow, one of the great teachings of my teachings are that we're embedded in a situation right now that is very, very dangerous on this planet. There's a lot A lot of problems. Environmental problems, social problems, economic, political, military, so many problems. So what can we do? Many of us do not have. I was listening to an interview with Jane Fonda the other day, and I think at that point of the interview, she'd been arrested 5 times. And the interviewer said, well, why are you doing what you're doing? She said, well, I have fame. I'm famous. I have a platform, and this is what I can do. And so I have a certain platform, and everybody that's listening to this has a certain platform. We access with this world in different ways. So in whatever way that you access, maybe you don't have the fame or the position that other people do, but you have some position, you have some place. So get up in the morning, each morning, and think, today I'm going to try to put goodness and beauty in the world. And you'll make mistakes, and you'll be frail, and you'll get angry, and you'll have all of those things will happen. They happen to me. But what we do is we get back up and we put goodness and beauty into the world again and again and again. And if enough of us are doing that, I really do believe we can bring about a shift in consciousness on this planet, which, by the way, I think is occurring. You know, when you've traveled as many places as I do, I've come to see this. There are people like me, people like you, Robert, people like the people that are listening to this interview. There's people like us all over the planet. And one of the things that I do in my slideshow is I also say to the people that are listening, oh, there's people like us all over the place. We'll never meet them. We'll never know their names. It's not important. But there's so many of us on this planet, and that gives you hope. It really does give you hope. There's so many more of us, and we're awakening all over this planet all the time now. That's such a hopeful thing to know. So even amidst all of this crisis, there's an awakening of consciousness happening on this planet. It's a wonderful thing to know.
Yeah, and back to your world pilgrimage guide, you really believe that the pilgrimage to these places of power could really accelerate and affect the consciousness. I remember you were saying about how there's a lot more people visiting these places than like concerts and soccer matches and things like that.
Yeah, if you study the social anthropology of pilgrimage, and there are scientists, sociologists, cultural anthropologists like myself who study this, and you will find out the most visited places on planet Earth are the pilgrimage sites, and they have been since the dawn of human civilization and pre-civilization. More people go to these places, visiting them as contrasted to cities where people live. More people travel to pilgrimage sites than any other category of place, any other thing. So the question then becomes, well, why are they doing that? And they're doing that because they're experiencing something at these places. Well, there's 3 types of people that go. There will be the traditional religious pilgrims. Hence, you will get Buddhists going to Buddhist sites, Christians going to Christian sites, Hindus going to Hindu. They don't usually go to each other's sites. You don't find Buddhists going to Jewish sites. You don't find Jews going to Christian sites. It's not like that. They go to the pilgrimage sites of their own particular religion. Then you have tourists. Now, the tourists they don't even know where they're going. They're going on a tour to England or a tour to Greece or a tour to Egypt. So when they're in England, maybe the tour company takes them to a few different places, and they also go and see Stonehenge. So they happen to be at one of these power places without even knowing what it is. They're just seeing a megalithic stone ring. And, oh, this is beautiful. Or they go to Greece. And when they're in Greece, they go to Mount Olympus maybe, and they go to the Parthenon, and they go to Delphi. And they don't really know what that means. They think, oh, it's just a Greek temple. But why is the Greek temple where it is, and who is the deity that the Greek temple was dedicated to? Or they go to Egypt, and then they go to the pyramids. So you have tourists going to these places of monumental architecture. It's very important. Monumental architecture. The big structures we built in ancient times. People go to those. So they're at these power places without really even knowing they are. And then you have people like me and you, Robert, and other people who are visiting these, and we wouldn't call ourselves religious pilgrims, and we're not going for tourism. We feel drawn to these places. That third group of people, I feel that number is really increasing around the world. Wherever I go, I see, and I've been going to some of these. I was just recently, I was back in Egypt this year, just 6 or 7 months ago. We're in the new year, 2020, but in 2019, I was back in Egypt again, and I've been there 4 times, and I went back to some places that I had been, in 1984, and there's more pilgrims like us, more people like me. So what I see happening is this third group of people that are visiting this, what I might call New Age pilgrims, that number is very much increasing. And so what I feel is what I'm saying is that we're on what I call the dawn, the beginning of a Gaian, like Gaia, a Gaian age of pilgrimage. I think you're going to see an increasing number of people visiting these power places and not sacred sites. Some of the sacred sites, oh, okay, they're sacred, they're a Buddhist, they're a Hindu, they're a Mohammedan sacred site, but let us look at more as power places. More and more people will be visiting these power places, and they're doing a few things that are happening when they're there. They're doing planetary acupuncture, whether they know it or not. You know, the needle that goes into an acupuncture point when it's being done, the practitioner is doing acupuncture on a person's body. The needle doesn't know anything. The needle's just something there. Well, when a human being is at the place, they're there, whether they know it or not, whether they know what this means or not, they're still there. There's a human energy field intersecting with the PowerPoint energy field at that place. So as more and more people do this, more and more planetary acupuncture is happening. And then also there's this transparency. The energy is going the other way. The earth is giving something to the people. So the energy is going both ways. And I feel as the understanding of that, the awareness of that, the knowledge of the meaning of the importance of that moves through popular culture more, that there's going to be an enormous increase in the number of people going to these places. And it's going to begin this Gaian age of pilgrimage that I think we'll look back in 10 or 15 years at this time that we're at right now, that we're just getting to be at the beginning of something really fascinating, really, really beautiful. I'm really glad that I've gotten to be a part of this beginning of this Gaian age of pilgrimage. People say, well, what should we do when we're at these power places? And I said, there's nothing you should do. If you want to meditate, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I used to juggle a lot of them. And you can take a nap. You can just hang out with people. You don't, there's nothing you should do. Just being there is enough. If you care to focus your intention in a certain way, that's all right. But there's nothing you need to do. I like to go into the shrines while the pilgrimages are happening, while the pilgrims are praying. And this is really a nice thing to know also. That if you say, well, what is it that's happening at these places? Two things are happening. People are saying please and thank you. People are doing praise and prayer. Now that's really, really wonderful to experience, because it doesn't matter what the religion is, because it's still that human, that expression of love, that expression of thanks, and that expression of praise and prayer. It's so wonderful to be in the field of that. And I a lot of times will stand in the back so that the pilgrims are doing their traditional religious practices, and I'm just in a room, the shrine, the temple, the mosque, the pyramid, whatever it is, with them, experiencing this, plugging into that. And so there's nothing you have to do, but just, I really do encourage people, wherever you're going to travel, go to Greece, go to Bolivia, go wherever you're going to do, and do what you do there. But go on to this World Pilgrimage Guide website, and you'll see all these Google Maps, and you go, oh, here's these places. So when I'm in Bolivia, or when I'm in Serbia, or when I'm in Japan, I'm going to go to some of these places too. And then you'll experience what I'm talking about. And they're also the most exotic places, and it's the greatest architecture. They're wonderful. A lot of them are UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and UNESCO, I give them my photographs for free. And a lot of the sacred sites are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So it's magnificent, magnificent stuff.
And if you're going to visit these places, then, and if you're going to want to understand the energy of these places, suddenly mythology, history, and cultural context becomes very important.
Yeah, I think people should take a parallel journey through the myths and the history of archaeology of these places, because then they'll have a deeper understanding of what's going on. And you don't have to read lots and lots and lots of books about that. I've kind of condensed that. I know Hinduism really well. I know Egyptology really well. I know Mesoamerican Egypt archaeology really well. And you could read 30, 40, 50 books. And on my website, by the way, there's some bibliographies. There's some categorized bibliographies. There's a bibliography of about 2,000 books that I've read that I think is good to read. But then I took 35 different categories: the Mayans, the goddess religions, Japan, Buddhism, whatever, all these 35 different categories. And in each of these categories, there's 10, 15, 20 books that I think are really important to read. And I'm a scholar. I like reading lots and lots and lots of books about these places. So there's the two things. There's having the experience, and then there's knowing about the place. And I feel that the two together are a good thing to have. And if you don't want to read lots and lots of books, so go on the website that I've got, and you'll get really nice, concise descriptions of the sacred sites. And there's a number of pages that are pilgrimage in the Hindu tradition, pilgrimage in the Japanese tradition, pilgrimage in, Shia Buddhism, Shia Islam. So you can get some real nice writings about that.
Nice. Well, before we close here, Martin, you're a long-time resident of Sedona, and Sedona is somewhat of a pilgrimage site, or now, these days, at least for, the tourist. I don't know if there's definitely a religion behind it or in front of it.
Sedona is a really fascinating example. If you study the archaeology and the ethnology of the southwestern United States, you will not find any indication that Sedona itself or the Red Rocks of Sedona had a spiritual purpose. You got Wupatki and Honanki and Palaki. You got these places, but these are on mini trade routes. That's what it is. It was wetter during the time when those settlement sites were there. And there were a number of other settlement sites in the Sedona, Cottonwood, Cornville, Flagstaff area. There were a number of other settlement sites, and it was warmer and it was wetter. And so people are living there. And when people live in a place, then they have some sort of religious site, but it doesn't mean it's a pilgrimage site. There is no evidence that Sedona area was important as a pilgrimage place. No. But then a woman named Paige Bryant, she came to Sedona in the late 70s and 80s, and she came out with a really good book called The Earth Changes Survival Manual. And Paige, when she was here, she had certain experiences, and then she talked about vortex sites. She was later a little bit sad that she talked about, I know Paige, she's now passed away. She was sad that the way she talked about it, because it gave rise to a certain sort of New Age myth about there being energy at particular places in the Sedona landscape, which there is not. But Paige was sort of overweight, and Paige had a real difficult time. She was weight challenged, she could say. Paige had a real difficult time climbing to certain places in Sedona. So it's interesting that all of her vortex sites are really easy to get to. Well, I've been to all of them. I've probably, when I was there, I was a real scrambler. I've climbed, if you can climb it in Sedona, I've climbed it. I've been to all sorts of places, all over Sedona. There's no archaeological evidence of the place being a sacred site in antiquity. And Page's ideas are sort of erroneous. So what is it that is happening in Sedona at this point? Well, that's fascinating, because in my writing, I talk about 32 different types of sacred sites. On my website, you'll see a listing of 32 different types of sacred sites with 3 or 4 examples of each. And then I say, okay, well, what is it that gives a place power? How do we explain this? And I say, okay, well, there's 20 different factors that I've isolated, that I've analyzed, 20 different factors that contribute to the power of place. Well, one of these factors is human intention. And by this, I mean, if you look at medieval pilgrimage cathedrals, and some people go, well, I don't like Christianity. Christianity came into Europe in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th century, and they were really rough on people. They killed a lot of pagans. They tore down their stone rings. Christianity, Catholicism was not good for Europe in certain ways. Yes, I agree. I do agree with that. And yet, if you look at where the great pre-Reformation pilgrimage cathedrals are in Europe, you'll find out, these were almost always sacred sites of different pagan people before. And so you have this church, or you have a stone ring, or you have a place, and somebody conceives of it. And then somebody raises the money or donates the money. And then there's all the builders and the craftsmen and all of the architects. And then there's the priests and all of the people that come to it once it's built. And so you have this focusing of human energy on a place for a long, 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 long time. So what you have happening in Sedona is that at this point, though there is no evidence whatsoever of any of these vortex sites having a pre-existing energy at them, now something is occurring, because now more and more people are going there to these places with this belief. And while they're there, they charge the place. By people being at these places, by people meditating, by people doing whatever they're doing, when they go to these places, there's a field that is developed. And that is fascinating to me of what is happening in Sedona at these vortex sites. Whereas there was nothing there before, other than, if you go 50 meters away, people go, that's not the vortex. Well, actually it is. It's all one, it's the whole planet is one living being. But there are particular points, very, very, very specific places. And some of those vortex sites in Sedona area are now currently, because I think it's 3 or 4 million people a year go to Sedona, and they're going, many of them, 50, 60% of them go to these vortex sites, even if they're laughing at it, even if they think, oh, let's do this silly New Age thing, go to this place where these silly Sedona New Agers think it's important. Well, then you have a human being with a heart, with a soul, with a mind, even if they're not aware of it. You have them at one of these places, and so it builds an energy there. So the power places in Sedona are becoming real. I really strongly feel this. I wish the guides in Sedona would have enough nuanced understanding of the subject. They don't have it. And I used to talk about it. Now I don't, because they don't understand it, or they don't like to have me rain on their parade. But guys, there weren't, but there are now power places in Sedona.
Interesting. We're gonna take a trip, and thank you for your insight on that, Martin. I appreciate it. We're gonna take a trip after the event the following weekend with you, Newman, and Jim Vieira, and a couple of other guides, Gary A. David and Bertram Savadawa, a Hopi guide. You know the Southwest very well. Could you talk about
The South
yeah,
States.
yeah,
I,
Arizona,
well, I've lived here a bunches and bunches of years in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas. Do I know it well? I don't know it as well as Gary David, but
right?
I know it well. I know it well. I know it well. Yeah.
What do you think is, I hear that the Hopi and Zuni, when they talk, they say they've been there tens of hundreds of thousands of years. That's how they look at their timelines. Do you think that's accurate? And one of the other question would be, what do you think about Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde, for example, and what might have been going on at Chaco Canyon?
Oh, that's a big, big, big subject. I write about it on my website. I don't write in particular about the Zuni and the Hopi and the Navajo, though I know about them. Chaco Canyon, basically seventh to 10th century. It's period of cultural fluorescence. Um, Very, very. Oh boy, there's some real mysteries about Chaco Canyon. Some real mysteries. Some really, really important stuff. But 7th to 9th century is not really very old. 7th to 9th century is not old at all. Um, oh gosh, Chaco Canyon, Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde wasn't as important as Chaco Canyon was. Mesa Verde was more important as a social center. Chaco Canyon, we don't have much evidence of people living there. It's more of a ceremonial site. And there were certain structures that were built there that had a certain function. And in Fajada Butte nearby is also very, very important. You can go and stay. You can camp at Chaco Canyon. I really suggest people do this. It's wonderful. You drive to Grants, New Mexico, and then you got to make a reservation to be able to camp at Chaco Canyon. And parts of the ruins are off limits at night, but other parts you can go to, and go in the summer on a full moon and camp there. You will have a very, very wonderful time. If you go to the Chaco Canyon National Park Museum there's a few good books there, but contemporary archaeologists, they have a hard time hearing about spirituality. They have a hard time understanding spirituality. So what they're going to do is they're going to tell you about carbon-14 testing and things like this, but they're not really going to understand the purpose of Chaco Canyon. That's kind of sad. But I think Gary does for sure, and some of the other do. Yeah. If you want to read a good book by Graham on this subject, he's got one of his books called Heaven's Mirror. I really like Graham. He wrote the foreword for my book, Sacred Earth. One of his books, Graham is very prolific. He's got, I bet, 10 books. They're all big, thick ones. One of them is called Heaven's Mirror. And his wife, Santha, did the photography of that. Santha's a good photographer. Heaven's Mirror has a whole lot of understanding that Graham knows about. Graham really knows archaeoastronomy. Graham really, and his friend Robert Boval, really know Egyptology and Egypt and archaeoastronomy. Boy, if you read Graham Hancock, everybody, I'm giving a plug for Graham Hancock. Friend and brilliant, brilliant man. There's two types of power places. There's power places where they're mountains or springs, and then there's power places where people built structures. Again, it's the place, whatever the type of structure that people built at that, and the structure has different functions. But again, the places, the structures are markers of place. This is very important to understand. A great example of this is another subject that I study a lot about is pictographs and paleo and the cave paintings and cave etchings. And I was speaking at a conference a bunch of years ago, and I said to people, okay, well, we can't really, archaeologists, anthropologists, we don't really know what the people that made these etchings, made these paintings in 17,000 BC. We don't really know what they were saying. What is important is where they set it. Because you'll go to some places where you'll have a cave and there's some paintings, some etchings in there, and there'll be a cave a mile away, a few kilometers away, and there it's just as good of a cave or just as good of a rock overhang, and there's no paintings there. There's no etchings there. Why? Because the people, whatever they were saying with their etchings and their paintings, they were saying it at a place. This is very, very, very important to understand. Irrespective of what you think the structure or the myths, any of this is, okay, here we have an indication, a marking of a place. So Chaco Canyon is at a very important place. It's the place that is important rather than the structure at it, rather than even the myths at it. It's the place. Well, the most important places of great, great sanctity in the Southwest are the four major sacred mountains. They're all on my website. And if you go on the website, there's all these beautiful Google maps, and you can zoom into them and see, oh, well, where are these different pilgrimage places of antiquity or more contemporary times? Where are they? And there's a number of really wonderful sacred sites in the southwestern United States, of which these four primary sacred mountains, of which I've spent time on all of them, are magnificent places. One is very close to you, north of Flagstaff, Kachina Peak.
Man. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love all the ruins out here. It's like right in our own backyard, you know. I never get tired of it, and you always see something different each time you go. Here's one you might not have heard of before. We went to Aztec ruins.
Sure, I've heard of it. Been there.
But I'm sure you've heard of the place, but there was something there that I noticed. In one wall, as we finished the loop, you know, there's like that loop, you go around the loop and you end. On the last building in the wall, I noticed, and the reason I notice this as a mosaic artist, I'm always looking at, are they creating any designs or patterns in the work, and why are they doing that? And
why?
I could see there was this rock wall with all the same colors, and then there was this one sliver the length of the wall that was a different color than all the other stones. It was dark black. And I thought, oh, that's weird. Did they
painted part of the rock?
No, it was just black rock. It was a different kind of rock, and it was a really thin sliver. What it looked like after looking at it for a while was like, it looks like a snake. And I know that the Hopi have the snake dance and all that kind of thing, but they always integrate universal symbols, universal, like set to the summer solstice or the spring equinox or winter solstice. It's like they had a universal map of their environment with these signs and symbols, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating notion too. The universality. Graham talks a lot about that. There was something going on, really developed civilization on this planet before the 12, 13, 14, 15,000 BC, years ago. We don't know where it was in particular. Another guy named Freddie Silva, coming to your conference, has written a book called is one of his most recent books, really good book, The Missing Land. Well, in it he talks about a number of places, almost all of which I've been to, which are evidences of something universal, and they're evidences of some civilization. They're outposts of something else. That something else, we don't know where it was, but there was something sophisticated here on the planet long, long ago, and you find a number of outposts of that. I think Graham studies that a whole lot. Freddie Silva studies that a whole lot. That fascinates me too. And it's an interesting thing, about the solstices and the equinoxes. This is one that a lot of people, it's hard for them to wrap their heads around. Like it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around the predictive qualities and abilities of astrology. Whoa, that one's a mystery. I can explain some of that. But here's an interesting one. When different celestial bodies, different planets, stars, moon, and sun are in a positional relationship with the earth, when these different celestial bodies are in a different positional relations with the earth, it causes a fluctuation or an increase in energies at particular sacred sites. And one of the reasons that people wanted to know when these dates were, and they set up these very sophisticated stone rings. They're not circles. 98% of the stones ring-like structures in Europe. It's not correct to call them stone circles, by the way. They're rings. A lot of them are weird ellipses. But these were used to predict in advance of their occurrence. In advance of their occurrence, people are doing something called horizon astronomy. They're not looking through large pieces of glass far off. They're watching the rising and the setting of different celestial objects on the horizon as it goes north and south. They're watching the rising and the falling of these objects so that they can know in advance of their occurrence when these days are going to be. And they're using these celestial observatories to watch the heavens, to watch these different celestial objects, so they'll know when certain time periods are coming. Then what they would do is they would send runners off across the countryside to let other people know that one of those dates were coming. This is the origin of pilgrimage. This is long before Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism. So people who lived elsewhere would come to these places on these particular dates, on the solstices, on the equinoxes, on the cross-quarter days, on lunar days, on Venus days, on different days. They would come when, again, and the people couldn't have explained this. They didn't know this. They didn't even know that they were necessarily celestial bodies. They just, well, I can go into a lot of detail about that, but on certain days, at certain periods, at certain sacred sites, there is a quality of energy that is only happening or intensely happening at particular times. So if you study the myths and the legends, and on my website, I try to, for every one of the sacred sites, I try to tell you, well, when are the festival dates? That's really important. When are the festival dates? When are the people coming? The people are coming on those dates that somebody in long ago understood. Oh, these are the dates. These are the times of the year when the energies at these places are most strong. So that's a boil down. That's a breakdown of what solstices and equinoxes are. They're not agriculture. I write about this on my website. They're not agricultural days. It has nothing to do with that. And I write about this. There's a really nice essay on my website about this. No. Agriculture was later pinned around them, put around them, but the solstice and the equinox is in the beginning. They were known before the advent of agriculture, by the way. It's not about agriculture at all. It's about understanding a positional relation of a certain celestial body, a positional relationship between that body and the earth, and the effect that has on certain places of power. And modern science nowadays is just beginning to get this, just beginning. But I think in a number of years, scientists are going to go, oh, wow, we missed that one. There's something more going on here than we thought.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you in May, Martin. As ever, thank you so much for your time and all that you do. It's 2020, so we better get some clear vision soon.
Yeah, that's nice. 2020. Okay, Robert, you and I got more to do, that's for sure. So it's cold where I am in the mountains of southern Argentina. From cold Argentina to cold in Sedona right now. Signing off. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. We'll talk again soon.